Welcome back. This next video is going to illustrate how to conduct an after-school program registration and to complete the required documents that come along with the after-school program registration. So the first thing we're going to do is look for the client in which the registration is occurring. We're again using our example of Bob Bobberson here, and we're going to go in Bob Bobberson's folder to look for that after-school program registration form. So here we go, it's at the very top. We're going to go ahead and create new for the program registration form. As you can see here, it pre-populates the date of the registration, assuming that when you're creating this record, the registration occurred on that date. If it is a different time, just make sure to change that. So here, we also want to indicate the fiscal year in which the registration is occurring, what after-school program that they belong to. So as you can see here, we really have six different after-school programs. There is the Bryant Elementary after-school program. That's the Bryant Community Center after-school program, elementary after-school program. Whereas we have this Bryant Elementary School after-school program, Bryant Teen Program. That's the Bryant Community Center Teen Program. The High Cone after-school program and summer camp registration, as the registration is bundled for both of those programs, and likewise for the Greenback Court after school program and summer camp, and then the Mitchell after school program and summer camp. Again, if there's an additional after school program that's not listed here, we'd click other and add that information. And then we're going to add in the client's household income, whether or not the child is allowed to walk home or not, whether or not the child receives free or reduced lunch, and then the school in which that child goes to. If you don't see the school that the child goes to in here, you can always click Other, and then the child's grade. Teacher information, if they have it. Depending on when the registration is occurring, you may or may not have that information. It is something that we can always obtain down the road if necessary. Whether or not the child has an individualized educational plan. For parents that have a child that do not have an IEP, they really do not quite often understand what an IEP is. What it is essentially additional resources for kids with some type of disability in which they receive additional services in the school. Ultimately, the parents that have children with an IEP, they know that their child has an IEP. So if the parent is unsure, odds are that the child does not actually have an IEP. If you do have additional Power School information, there's a couple different ways of putting that information in here. There is this method right here. This actually is going to be phased out. So by the time you watch this video, this might not actually be there anymore. Or you can actually add it from the client's sensitive client information form, and you can search for that client's form. So here you'll see that the Power School information is in fact not added to this client yet. So what we're going to do here is click New. Oh, but it actually won't let us because we have to save the current record first. So let's go back here. We're going to save this record. It will refresh. And we're going to scroll down here and go through that again. See, it already has it queued up. And we're going to indicate that it's Power School that we're putting in here. And then we're going to put in the username and password for that individual. Just a quick note on this form. This is a more restricted form within the database, so not everybody necessarily has access to it. This is where we store much more sensitive information like Social Security numbers, Power School information, things of that nature. So now we're going to go ahead and save this record. Now we're going to close it out and have our after-school program registration form refresh, and now we see that the PowerSchool information is in fact in there. Keep in mind that depending on the age and the school of the child, that they may not actually have PowerSchool information, and so if you do not have that information or does not exist for that person, that is not uncommon. So then here, the primary emergency contact, that's typically the parent, but the parent may actually list somebody else instead. And ideally, it would be nice to have secondary emergency contact. It's not required, but we certainly would prefer to have somebody to fall back on if the primary emergency contact isn't available. And then here, if the child has any medications, things like albuterol or Ritalin, if there's any known allergies, let's say tomatoes, what your insurance company is. If they don't have insurance, then obviously this is not going to get filled out. But if they do, please obtain that information. And then policy number as well. And likewise, and then if there's any additional medical information, let's say recently broke arm or something of that nature. And if there's any other special needs, so if the child, for example, has asthma or ADHD, autism, what have you, this would be the place to include that information. Alright, so this next portion of the form is depends on your site. Currently, this portion of it is used solely at the Bryan Community Center location. So just consult your supervisor on whether or not you are to complete this portion of the registration. So then now at this point in time, what we're going to do is save our record, and then what we're going to be doing is adding the different forms that we need to add to complete the registration. So there's specifically a client rights and responsibilities form. Kind of the short version of that is it outlines the rights that the CAN client has, things like being treated with dignity and respect, confidentiality, things of that nature, and some of the responsibilities of the client as well. And then there is a field trip and activity permission form. It just basically explains that we may be taking kids on field trip or doing activities with the kids, and then we have the parents' explicit permission for that. The liability waiver, which is a very standard form. And then the release of information. This is a program required form, so it definitely needs to be completed. And in fact, the only one that does not need to be completed is the media and photo release. That is an optional form in which the parents can or decide to fill that out or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do one example of one of these forms. What we're going to be doing is accessing the form by adding it, because it actually lives in a different spot within the database. And then what we're going to be doing is pulling up the client's name. And we can see here that there is not a release of information already created for this client. So what we're going to do is we're going to click New. And then now it takes us to the release of information form. So one thing to note here is that at this point in time, this portion of the registration really should be done on some type of tablet device, as the signature field really does not come out so well when trying to do so with a mouse or a touchpad on a laptop or computer. So make sure that we indicate who this all applies to, and then if there was a reason that the standard 2-year period for the release of information wants to be specified at a shorter time or longer time, here is where you can actually indicate where to actually specifically end it. Typically we just want to default it at the 2-year time though. And then if there are specific agencies in which the CAN client would not like to have information released to, that can be specified here. Just note that that it is required for us to be able to communicate with that student's school, and so we cannot exclude the school in which the child belongs to, as we will need to communicate with them. In a quick correction, so down here is where we'll put that indication. Up here is if there's an agency not listed as one of the coordinating agencies. Here's the long list of them. If there's a need to add an additional one, you would put that information in here. And then for the parent, this is where they would do their signature. And you just click this button to sign. Click done and save. And so now what we've done is created that release of information form and saved it. So once we close this out and refresh the registration form, we will see that it now lives. It's now connected to that after-school registration form. And ultimately we repeat this process for each one of these forms here. So the other thing to note is that it's not uncommon that we'll have a parent that has more than one child in our after-school programs. This portion of the registration, where the creating the release of information, the media and photo release form, the liability waiver, field trip and activity permission form, the client rights and responsibilities, that only needs to be completed once per year. And so what can happen is that when there's another child, you would just click add here, and then you would search for where that previous form was already created, and then attach it to that additional client's registration. Alright, that is in a nutshell how to conduct an after-school program registration.